uh, offering ketamine assisted therapy. We're also very shortly becoming licensed facilitators as well, starting our facilitator practice. And maybe just one thing I'll say just quickly before I hand things off to Carrie is that Synaptic Institute is a nonprofit organization, and our program really emphasizes the spiritual nature of this work. We don't hold any particular, faith or dogma or anything. We just try to offer a really well-rounded balance of science as well as spirit and tradition in doing this work. And so we try to convey that through a program. Our second cohort is starting on the 30th of August, and we are cutting off applications at the end of this week. And that's probably not why most of you are here, but if by chance you are interested in the facilitator training program and want to learn more about ours, you can check out our website, synaptic.institute. We'll put that in the chat. And then synaptic.care is our clinic website. If you or someone you know would benefit from that sort of service, you can reach out to us there. And our training retreats are also open to anyone who's interested in being trained for doing this type of work, not necessarily having to be in like the full training program. We're also offering some of our courses individually, so you don't have to commit to the full cohort. And I think I'll just leave it at that, in terms of what we are, what we're about. You can check out our website for more information. We completed our first cohort, of which Carrie is a graduate. He was a really wonderful member of that cohort who contributed just wonderfully to the beautiful culture of that community. And we're very confident in him in being, just a really valuable facilitator to his community and out in Mount Hood. And so anyway, he's going to be introducing a little bit about what is Measure 109, how does it work? There's a lot of kind of funky rules that are difficult to wrap one's head around. And so with that being said, I'm just going to hand it off to Carrie, unless there's anything else you wanted me to say, Carrie.
I would just like to piggyback on one other thing, as from the flip side of being somebody who went through your program. I mean, one of the reasons that I chose Synaptic, as I was going through, trying to decide which program to choose, one of the things that really stood out for me with Synaptic was they are a nonprofit, and that made a big difference to me. The fact that Synaptic is mission driven, they're doing it for the right reasons. They're not, everybody's profit motivated, but it's not the sole purpose of what they're trying to do. They're really trying to make a difference in the world, and so that made a big difference when I was trying to decide as to which program to choose. And the culture, it couldn't have been any better. I felt like we really had a very special first cohort. And everybody was really, really close through the program and still are. So I just really appreciate the community that Olivia and Dr. Hicks have both created for us. So thank you. Yeah. So before I jump in, does anybody have any questions? Anything burning desires? Maybe a housekeeping. Can somebody watch the chat and interject questions for me? Does anybody want to volunteer for that?
I'd be happy to do that, Carrie.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I really intended this. I developed this presentation really in order to help educate people, because as I've gone out and I've started explaining to people what I'm trying to do with this education and under this measure, there's been a lot of questions that have come up with people. How does this work? What's the process? And I thought it'd be a good idea to just put it all together, not just the education that I received at Synaptic, but my understanding of how this is going to work and what the magic of it is, and put it all into one presentation, and really in a way to educate people and to answer all of their questions all at once. So that's the intention here. It's really education. I hope this is the first of many. Part of what I'm going to be doing is developing more of these types of content courses to help educate people. I think that's really needed even before people get into the medicine. I think it's important for informed consent and for people to really be educated as to what they're entering into. So I feel like the education component is just as important as the medicine itself. So that's what I'm trying to do. And hopefully I'll develop, I have some other ideas for other content, but I'm open to ideas too. If there's other content, as an example, a lot of people have asked about microdosing versus macrodosing. So that's another presentation that I'll be doing. Because my background is in addiction and recovery, I want to do some specific content around that, about using psychedelics for those of people in recovery. But hopefully, again, this is the first of many that I can hopefully and do maybe through Synaptic as well. So with that, I'll jump in. First and foremost, I just want to thank everybody for coming and attending. I know that everybody's life is busy, and I appreciate us all co-creating and spending this time together. I'm really grateful for that. Even on in this panel, we have a pretty deep well of knowledge. So even though I'm presenting information, I really intended this to be a discussion. So please ask questions in the chat or raise your hand via Zoom, and let's have a discussion. And if I can't answer your question, again, we have a deep well of information and experience here, so we can all share. And I'm not an authority. There are people here who've done perhaps many more psychedelics than I have. So, this is a time for us to share and learn and grow together. So that's really the intention. So please chime in. And with that, I think I'll just go ahead and dive in. If I can pull up I'll share my screen and pull up the presentation. And beginning. So there it is. So welcome, everyone. I am the owner of 7 Gen Concepts. It is a facilitation business. I'm going to be focusing on facilitation of psilocybin, legal facilitation of psilocybin under Measure 109. I'm also going to be focusing on education and events as well. So that's really going to be my focus under that LLC. But I think we live in a really interesting time. How wild is it that as I give this presentation, there are people getting psilocybin treatment, or not treatment, facilitation. They're getting administration of psilocybin legally here in Oregon. This is an amazing time to live in. And so with that, as I've been talking to potential clients, all kinds of questions have come up. My personal story is, I'm like a lot of people. I tried psychedelics in college and had a great experience and kind of filed that away as a life experience. And then fast forward, now that it's legal, my only experience with it was really recreationally. So a lot of people's only experience with these types of medicines, these plant medicines, are in a recreational setting. So I really wanted to arm people with information about how the Oregon model under Measure 109 is a lot different. And there's a whole process that I'll walk you through that people follow in order to maximize the benefits of the plant medicine itself. And we'll talk about all those components from preparation to administration to integration. Okay. So just a couple of quick notes on housekeeping. I may have mentioned or may not have mentioned, I am a licensed pending Oregon psilocybin facilitator. What that means is all of my paperwork is in with the Oregon Health Authority. I actually was just on the phone with them yesterday. All my paperwork is in. I'm trying to get that finalized and get that license. I'm hoping to get that license this week or maybe even next week. But very, very shortly, I will be legally allowed to facilitate here in Oregon. As I mentioned before, I am a graduate of Synaptics Training Institute, 6-month program, great program. It was a 6-month program. It's part of it's in classroom, part of it's hands-on. We actually do model the facilitation with clients in altered states, and it was really life-changing, just that program. But the way that a lot of potential clients that I've been talking to, they ask one of the first questions they ask me is, how did I get into this? I've had many chapters in my life. Many of you know me personally, but this most recent chapter is very unique for me, but I think it really comes from a long line of, I'm very open about the fact that I have 18 years of recovery from substance use disharmony. And I think this latest iteration in my life really stems from that self-discovery, that recovery, that internal introspection about what led me to substance use disharmony, the trauma in my life, that whole process has led me to where I'm at today. And I think that's really why I'm so interested in helping people with plant medicine, with psilocybin, to help really change people's life and transforms and change patterns. And we'll talk about patterns a lot throughout this presentation. You'll hear me talking a lot about that. So me personally, I practice a daily meditation. I like to label myself as an aspiring Buddhist. I've studied both somatic and IFS. For those of you not familiar, that's internal family systems. I've studied both of those types of therapy. I am not a medical professional. I just want to clarify that. I am not a therapist. This presentation is not intended to make any health claims, but it really is just to arm you with information. And I did have another plug in there. As Dr. Hicks already mentioned, the psilocybin training program, the cohort 2 starts here at the end of August. So if anybody's interested, jump into that. And I do have another person, by the way, that is interested who may be joining late. So just an overview of what we'll be covering today. I think it's important for us to put the latest renaissance of psychedelics into proper context. So I think that includes a brief history of magic mushrooms. This is not going to be an exhaustive college lecture. I'm just going to give a brief overview of kind of where it's come from and where we're at today. Then I want to talk a little bit about what I mentioned before, recreational use versus the Oregon model, the legal use, why it's important to use a facilitator or guide when you're in an altered state. And then I really want to talk about the safety and the benefits of psilocybin, because I'm a kid who grew up in the 80s and 90s, and there was so much popular culture drilled into my head as a young person about the danger of drugs and dare all the stuff. And I just think that we have to peel back some of the science, and that leads me into the next point that I want to make, is talk about the modern science and the resurrection of that science and where it's at today. There's a lot of really, really good hard science going into this. I'm not a scientist, so I will probably bungle that part, but I'll do my best. And then we'll peel back the layers of the actual Oregon model, what the components of that are, and we'll walk through that. And then I want to talk about what you would expect if you were to do a journey on psilocybin. What is it exactly you would expect to experience, and what that would be like, and including some dosage recommendations as well. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A, but again, don't hesitate to ask any questions along the way. Okay, so I'd like to ground us. I think this quote really grounds us. It's what I was mentioning to where we've come from and where we are today. And I want to just read this. In many, many ways, all of us are indebted to the indigenous peoples and their traditions and the knowledge when we are interested in these medicines. This is not a new thing. Indigenous cultures have been using plant medicines for thousands of years. And so this is not something we've just, as white people, have just discovered. And I think we need to keep that in perspective as we talk about this. So with that being said, we'll start at the beginning. In the ancient Greek and Roman cultures, there was a cult named I'll bungle the pronunciation, Eleusinian mysteries. And they, on an annual basis, they would get together and they would have a 10-day feast ceremony gathering where they would consume a sacred potion, if you will, called kukion or kaikion. And it's really, scholars disagree with what was really composed in that. So, some people say it was wine, but wine in those days could have been made of many different medicinal herbs and plants. It was not like the wine we think of today. So there is evidence that some type of psychedelic could have been contained in that kukion. So psilocybin, LSD, or DMT are thought to have maybe perhaps been active ingredients. But essentially what it boiled down to is this was a ceremony. It was sacred. It was secret, very secret. People who were initiated into the cult were required to keep it secret, and you would be punished if you would talk about the secrets. But the idea was that you would perform the ceremony, take the medicine, and you would be transformed by near-death experiences. And I know that sounds scary, but the idea was that by overcoming their fear of death and by facing these challenges, they would come out the other side reborn, so to speak, and they would lose their fear of death and really come to understand their purpose in life, or life's purpose. And that was really kind of the first recorded that we know of, that I know of, experience with these types of plant medicines. But if we fast forward, we do know have a much better record from archaeology of the ancient Aztecs and Mayans using mushrooms, specifically mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, in their ceremonies and rituals. And they called it the flesh of the gods. Again, I will not try to pronounce the medicine, but they used it in rituals and ceremonies and feasts. And again, they recognized that this was something that could heal, and they used it for traditional medicine and healing powers. And on the right there, you'll see some artifacts. There was actually a lot of things survived, even though a lot of Catholic missionaries tried to destroy the artifacts. A lot of these mushroom stones survived and are in museums to this day. And even some of them were used to grind up the actual medicine itself as a sacrament and for these rituals. So we know that these mushroom stones existed and these ceremonies existed. So let's fast forward a little bit further to relative modern day. It's pretty well documented for any of you who've watched some of the documentaries recently about magic mushrooms. In our popular current culture, Maria Sabina from Mexico really introduced the West to mushrooms in around 1955, 1957. There was an amateur mycologist named R. Gordon Wasson who traveled to Mexico and met with Sabina several times, was trying to understand the psilocybin mushroom and their tradition and their use of it in ceremony. Initially, she refused to let him partake, but R. Gordon Wasson lied to her and said that his son was ill and that he wanted to participate in the ceremony to help heal his son. So Sabina relented and let Wasson in on the ceremony. Again, he lied to her again and said he would not use her name or popularize it. He actually went back to the United States and did a full national spread in Life magazine in 1957. And it was quite the shock. And if you could imagine in popular culture, this is the first time people had really heard about this. As a result, as you could imagine, young people, the counterculture, the beat culture, young people flocked to Mexico after this. By 1962, there was a lot of tourism, and it really damaged the local culture. And I share this as a cautionary tale, not that, again, we need to be very thoughtful and reverent of this medicine, because this has been used, again, by indigenous peoples for many, many years, thousands of years. And we have to be really sensitive and reverent of what we're doing with this medicine, because it does have ramifications to other cultures, and it's sacred. It's sacred. So unfortunately, Maria and her family were ostracized by their local culture, and their family's house was burned down. So, oh, there's somebody else who wants to come in. I'm going to admit them. All right. So let's talk a little bit about recreational use versus the organ model. As I alluded to before, many people's experiences many people have used magic mushrooms recreationally. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I want to stress that can be a very different experience than what we're talking about under the organ model. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times when you're using mushrooms recreationally, you're doing it in a social setting, you're doing it with your friends, or you're doing it in nature. So under those circumstances, you're relating to other people, your friends, or you're relating to nature, and it's an external experience. You're having an external experience, you're observing other people, you're experiencing trees and plants, but it doesn't necessitate introspection. And people can still use psilocybin under the organ model for recreation, but really most people are probably going to be seeking this out to do more inner exploration and introspection. And really what I've found is that people that come to me and talk to me about it is because they want to establish new patterns. Maybe they're stuck in their life. Maybe they don't like how they react to things or whatever. And they come to me and they say, Carrie, I'm interested in this because I'm just stuck in my life and I want to get unstuck. And so those are the type of people I think will really benefit from this internal. And I'll show you some examples of how it's going to be used. I'll show you some videos of how the model under the organ model, what it's going to look like. But it's going to be more of an internal thing, not a social thing. Although you can do it in a group setting under the organ model. But we'll couch that for now. So a couple of things that are different. A lot of people might try to compare the organ model to cannabis that came through, 10 or more years ago. That was under a medical model. The psilocybin model is not a medical model. it is going to be, it's not a retail model. It's only going to be administered, psilocybin can only be administered in Oregon at licensed service centers and with licensed facilitators like myself. So that's worth noting. These are not retail dispensaries. This is not something where you can go and buy psilocybin and take it home and do it yourself. Not under the current model. That may change, but that's not how it is currently. So again, we don't follow a medical model here in Oregon. You don't, which means that's actually a good thing, because that means you actually don't need a prescription. Any adult person over 21 years of age can go to a service center and follow the process, get screened, and work with a facilitator to do these services. On the flip side of that, because it's not a medical model, insurance doesn't cover this type of administration. So it's going to all be out of pocket. And there are some concerns, legitimate concerns of cost, at least initially out of the gate. And we can talk about that as well. But I hope that kind of grounds everybody in the difference between recreational use and Measure 109. We'll call it just Measure 109, or the Oregon model use. Okay. Let's see, it's not fast forwarding. Oh, there we go. Okay, so the importance of using a facilitator. It's not because I want to get hired and make money. It's because I want to keep you safe. I think that needs to be stressed. Is the facilitator really there? Think of them as a river raft guide. If facilitators are your guides who have been down this river many times before, they know how to navigate the waters. They know where you are during the journey, and they're there to keep you safe and help you create a container so that you can explore that introspection that I talked about. So even though this is very deeply personal work, it's still important to use a facilitator, and I can't overstate that. One of the phrases that I like to use is psilocybin is the catalyst. It's just the medicine, it's the catalyst that helps you change. You do your own healing, your brain and your own self. You do your own healing, and the facilitator just keeps you safe during the process. So I have a quote here that I took from an online trippingly guide, and it says, "During the experience of awakening to oneself, it is invaluable to be with someone who can support you and whom you trust." So I think I've made that point, but I do believe that is an important part of the process. This is a bit of a busy chart, but I think it's a great chart. This comes from a study out of the UK. People ask me about the risks and the risk of psilocybin. This chart is intended to show you, provide some perspective on harm. I'll just point out a couple of things. On the left-hand side, it may be hard to read, but on the left-hand side, the medicines or the drugs that cause the most harm to self and to society are alcohol, heroin, and crack cocaine. We all think of those things as potentially pretty harmful. On the very other end of the spectrum are the classic psychedelics, mushrooms, LSD, and ecstasy. So I just try to share with clients that there's never no risk. There's always going to be risk, but to be informed is important, and to go into it knowing that there's very low likelihood of harm. And there's ways to screen for that and prevent that, and even create those safe containers to help with that as well. So the benefits, I mentioned this before, the clients often come to me and they say they're stuck in suboptimal patterns. Some of the scientific studies and also the people that have come to me bear this out. A lot of people seek out this type of plant medicine because of anxiety or depression or trauma, or they're struggling with addiction. I've personally heard stories and my personal experience of people who have immediately quit smoking, drinking, quit eating junk food, and their depressive symptoms and anxious feelings have gone away completely with 1 or 2 journeys or admin sessions. I've seen it happen in person, and it's quite profound. It can be quite life-changing. So when people ask what the benefits are, I've seen it firsthand. Quite often people say that they're re-energized, or they're more connected, they're re-engaged in their life. But I do like to caution people that psilocybin really isn't a magic bullet. Really what it does is it provides you new insights, new ways of looking at things, and potential new patterns, but you have to integrate those into your life going forward. And again, that's part of what a facilitator helps you do, is harvest those insights and then help you integrate those insights going forward. Okay. Another quote, and this will get us into the science section of the talk. So although many of us think that psychedelics are as dangerous, or think of psychedelics as dangerous drugs, it's time for a rethink. They are non-toxic, non-addictive, and have very few side effects, and could potentially offer relief for people suffering from a range of psychological difficulties. And this is from, I just found a lot of quotes. I looked up psychedelic quotes, and I found some that I thought were really, really pertinent. So again, I am not a scientist. We could probably do a whole nother, I'm sure we could do a whole nother series of lectures on just the science and all the studies. There are dozens and hundreds of studies going on currently around psilocybin and other psychedelics. I cherry picked a few that I thought kind of just touch on the major categories: depression, anxiety. There's been significant findings that anxiety and depression can be reduced quickly and significantly through the use of psilocybin. And that was from a 2016 study. But if you go on, and I'll have a thing at the end that has resources that we can that show you where to find more information. And again, I can send this presentation as a PDF to people afterwards if they want. But I'll have a resource page, but links to some places to find more studies on this. And then when it comes to substance use disharmony, there was another study that heavy drinking was reduced by 83% among heavy drinkers when combined with psychotherapy after psychedelic mushrooms. So I coming from a place of AA and recovery, reducing heavy drinking by 83% is amazing. If you look at AA statistics of people who recidivism, 83, there's a reason that psilocybin has been noted has been designated as a breakthrough therapy by the FDA. There's only two drugs that right now that have been, MDMA and psilocybin, have both been labeled as breakthrough therapies. And hopefully in the next year or two, there will be both MDMA and psilocybin will be rescheduled, hopefully away from a substance, Schedule 1 substance. Hopefully, fingers crossed. So I've done a lot of talking. I think it's good to break up and again, because I'm not a scientist, I'd like somebody who is a scientist to explain a little bit more about the default mode network. So part of the reason we believe that psilocybin works is because the way that I think about it is, if anybody's ever driven a U-Haul truck, I know this sounds weird. If you've ever driven a U-Haul truck, so a lot of those trucks have what they call a governor on them, meaning you can't drive on the highway over a certain speed limit. It limits you. It actually, like when you're going 60 or 70 on the freeway, you put it to the floor and the truck won't go any faster. And that's called a governor on a truck. Our brains, in my understanding of this, I mean, Olivia and Dr. Hicks, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is our brains work in a similar fashion. We can only take in so much stimuli. We have an administrative function in our brain that allows us to bring in stimuli in a consciousness. And it in some respects, it limits what our consciousness is, because we can't assimilate so much information. When you're in psilocybin, my understanding is it breaks that default network down and allows different parts of your brain to talk to each other that don't normally talk to each other, and allows more information in and allows different neuroplasticity. So we can talk at the end if I botch that, but let's just watch the video and talk about the default network.
Harry, it's not coming through on my end. I don't know if it's playing for you.
Oh, I can't hear it. Okay, can we not hear that? Is that right? Okay. Well, this is the first time. Basically, what they're saying is psilocybin allows the default network to reset your brain. So sorry about that. I will have to work on that for the future, and we'll just go back to the presentation. So the next slide, this is an fMRI picture of what your brain, the connections in your brain normally and on psilocybin. As you can tell, there's a lot more connectivity when you're in psilocybin. And I recently read an article in, of all the places, the Utah Bee, which is a newspaper out of Utah. And I was reading an article and it kind of explained, there's just a couple of sentences here that kind of explain this graphic. And I just want to read this to you. So it says, psychedelics light up the brain like a Christmas tree. They affect our prefrontal cortex, where abstract thinking, thought analysis, mood, and perception come from. They allow new neural pathways to be formed, which can permanently alter our ways of thinking and perceptions of our universe. So again, new neural pathways, neuroplasticity, new patterns can be formed, new ways of looking at things can be formed. That's the way that I understand this to work. All right, let's keep going. Any questions? Before I dive into the organ model, maybe it's a good time to pause and ask if there's any questions. Oops, let me go back. Trying to look at the chat. Doesn't look like it's playing. Okay. All right. If there's no questions, I'll just dive into what the process is here in Oregon. The next few slides, what I did is I literally just took the graphics that Oregon Health Authority used to describe the process, and I just carved them out and share them with you. So this comes directly from the Oregon Health Authority. There are 3 high-level steps to the process, and if you choose to do this type of work with a service center, with a facilitator, this is the process you're going to follow. I would add that there's probably one above these 3 steps, which is a consultation. That's normally, in any business, you're going to have a free consultation, and that's what most facilitators are going to do. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Trust is a paramount in this type of work. So you're going to want to trust the facilitator or somebody you want to work with. So it's a chance for you to get a free consultation and get to know your facilitator. They're going to ask you a lot of questions about why you want to do this type of work and what you hope to get out of it, hopefully during the process. And then it also gets a chance for the facilitator itself to get to know you, because it has to fit both ways. There has to be trust. And I don't pretend to know that, if somebody comes to me with a specific intent, there may be another facilitator that can help facilitate that person better than me. So we all work. I know that I'm going to work with a network of providers and refer people back and forth. But again, probably a consult above all this. But then once you go through a consult with your facilitator and you agree that you want to work together, the next step would be a preparation session. And that's where you actually meet either in person or online via Zoom with your facilitator. And I'm going to break down each of these 3 steps in more detail, but you do a prep session, which is required by law. And then after the prep session is complete and you fill out all your paperwork and you do your screen, you go to the actual administration session. And that's where the magic happens. And that's where you take your medicine. And again, I'm going to break this down in a lot more detail, but I'm just doing this high level at first. Then the administration is your journey, and that can last from 3 to 6 hours, depending on the dosage that you do. And then, even though it's not required by law, the people that I work with, I'm going to either highly recommend, or I am actually going to probably not work with people who don't want to do integration. That's just me. I think that it is so important to this type of work that the integration is really the crux of where you get the benefit from this work, because all those insights again come up during the journey and during the administration. And what is it you do with that new information? And that's where the integration is so important. And that usually follows the administration session by a day to 3 days. So let's break down. And on the right-hand side, you can see that all of this is facilitated by a licensed facilitator, person like myself, who's been trained, who's been certified, has gone through an exam, a background check, submitted paperwork, has a social equity plan. There's a lot, believe me, there's a lot that goes into be a licensed facilitator here in Oregon. And then the other portion of this is the other safety portion of this is that all of the product that you'll be taking in a service center will be produced by a licensed manufacturer, and they go through a very rigorous process. Once they grow the mushrooms themselves, they send that to a licensed laboratory. The laboratory tests it for the content of the psilocin itself that's inside of it. They make sure it's safe. Everything is barcoded and tracked and sent to the licensed service center. And then that's where you consume it on site in the service center. Okay, so let's break down each of those real quick. So the preparation session, I like to schedule 2 hours because there's a lot to cover. And again, a lot of this can be done during the consultation or even back and forth via Zoom ahead of time. But the preparation itself is very important because you have to review a lot of forms together that are required by the state. You have to work on setting an intention. And I think that's a really important part of the journey itself is what is your intention for the journey? What is it that you want to get out of it? What is it that you hope to go back to if you're having some challenges? You talk about logistics, where it's going to happen. As a client, you're going to have your choice of service centers and you're going to have your choice of experiences and what type of experience you want to have. Do you want to have a one-on-one journey? Do you want to have a group journey? Do you want to do an affinity group? Maybe you are somebody who wants to quit smoking and you want to do it as a group of people who want to quit smoking. So you do it as a group. There's a lot of different ways you can tackle this. And then you talk with your facilitator about dosage. What type of experience? How experienced are you? Is this your first time doing mushrooms? Is this something where you're ready for more of a challenge? You want to go and do a heroic dose? We'll talk about what that means. Music is really integral to this type of work. It's hard to put into words. There's a term that I learned that so describes so much that happens during a mushroom journey. The word is ineffable. And there's so much that is associated with this type of work that is ineffable, which means you can't put it into words. The experiences that you have, the feelings that you have, the music, the integration of the music, it's beyond words. Until you've gone through the process and experienced it, then you'll have an understanding. But I think music is so integral to this type of work, but I can't describe why. It just is. And then, of course, your facilitator should arm you with what to expect, what you would expect during your journey. And I won't go through all the forms, but there are a number of forms that you're going to need to fill out if you're going to do this at a service center. So there's a Bill of Rights, there's informed consent. You need to have a safety plan. You need to have a transportation plan. If you want supportive touch, you need to consent to that. And there's rules around that within the OHA. So it's not, these are all important things. These are, again, people can look at these forms as a headache, but think of it, I'd like to reframe that perspective and say, really, they're there to keep you safe. It's there to have you have a good, safe experience to do that container again, to have that introspective space for yourself. And then once you're done with all this, then you can plan your admin session, where and when and how it's going to happen. So that's all done during the preparation session. And that is a paid session usually with a facilitator, just to set expectations. And then the magic, the administration session. And again, depending on dosage, it can last for 3 to 6 hours. Before you go into the medicine, you normally review your intention with your facilitator. You get a chance to get your setting. Set and setting are very important. For those of you who aren't familiar with those terms, set is the mindset that you bring into the journey itself, and your facilitator will help you with that. And then the setting itself is what type of environment. I included this picture in here just to kind of show you that, again, this is not separate from a recreational use. A lot of this is really internal introspection. So oftentimes clients are going to be in a daybed and they're going to have a mask on, they're going to be listening to music, and they're really going to go internally and do their own work internally. It's not required, but that's generally how people are approaching this. You are going to have an altered sense of consciousness, and that's going to hopefully lead to potential new insights for you. And it's your job, it's the job of the facilitator to be there to harvest those insights in whatever form you agree to, whether that's them writing it down or sound recording it, or maybe even video recording it. That's up to you. That's up to you and your facilitator, how you want to harvest those insights. But it's the facilitator that will collect that, because you may or may not remember all the things that come up for you when you're in an altered state. So they're there to keep you safe and to remember what you are sharing with them, so that you can revisit that during the integration phase. Is this all making sense? I'm kind of going through this pretty rapidly. So, all right. So what to expect? I didn't take a poll of how experienced. It doesn't matter how experienced people are on this call. Whether it's your first time or your 100th time, you're probably going to have, depending on the dosage, you're going to have an altered consciousness. You're going to have potentially visuals, open-eyed or closed-eyed visuals. Time is going to be distorted. again, those insights and that self-reflection is going to come up. You're going to be making connections that maybe you haven't made before. You'll have aha moments. You'll be, oh, that makes sense to me. Why didn't I make that connection before? And it'll all be revealed. It's really, I get excited because it's really amazing. It can be really transformational. You have enhanced creativity. Again, those connections, that fMRI that I showed, all those different connections. Spiritual encounters, that's a very common one, and that can be different things for different people. Some people, if you're religious, can be a God experience. If you're not religious, it can be a sense of unity or oneness or cosmic. I'm not trying to insert anything into anybody's brains, but those are the things that are commonly reported, types of spiritual encounters. Heightened intuition, you can be like, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. And then at higher doses of psilocybin, you can have complete ego dissolution or transcendence of oneself. And that can go two different ways. That can be scary, or that can be pretty transformational. And that's why your facilitator is there to help you through those types of things. So I won't play this video because the sound won't probably play like the last one. The only reason I was going to show this video is because I wanted to arm you with kind of a visual of what to expect from a setting standpoint. This picture does a good job of kind of showing you what a typical service center might look like. There'll be a kind of this picture is from an actual medical model out of the UK, but it's going to be similar. I mean, it's going to be kind of like a day bed or a couch. You're going to be reclining and relaxed, maybe blankets. It's very common actually to get cold when you're in the medicine. So usually you'll have blankets available. In a lot of medical models, they have two facilitators. That's not required under the Oregon law, but you will be required to have one facilitator. And if you're doing a group setting, you might have multiple facilitators. But again, this is the type of a kind of a darkened, quiet, gentle music, flowers, a natural and as natural as can be inside. There will be some service centers that may have outdoor opportunities to be outdoors, but those will be fairly limited out of the gate. And we can talk about that, but most service centers will be indoors. So just a note about dosage. These are not hard and fast. This is just really meant to be a guide. If you are experienced or not experienced, if somebody's talking to you about dosage, these are just guidelines as to what you could expect at different levels of, this is, I should say, this is grams of dried mushroom. This is not milligrams of psilocin, which is the active ingredient. I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but this is what you think of is like if somebody grows a mushroom, dries it out, and then weighs it. This is dried whole fruited mushroom. So this is in grams. Of course, the percent of psilocin, the active ingredient, can differ in different mushrooms, but I should mention under the Oregon model, it's all one strain. So you might hear about different strains of magic mushrooms. Under the Oregon model, all service centers will be using cubensis. Psilocybe cubensis is the only strain that's going to be used. And so it hopefully will have a fairly consistent amount of medicine, and people will, be able to predict kind of what level of dosage will be appropriate. Personally, my personal bias would be to work with people from the mini to moderate doses for a couple of reasons. I think for the work that most people want to do, those are appropriate levels. For people who are more experienced, it may be appropriate to go to mega dose. But my opinion, my informed opinion, is that when you start getting into the higher doses, sure, you can have great things like ego dissolution, which sound great. Who doesn't want to transcend their ego? But the flip side of that is you disassociate so much that you don't retain any knowledge. You don't actually remember the transformation. You don't bring back with you the transformation that you're looking for. So that's just my opinion. Talk to different facilitators and get their opinion. I'm just one opinion. But I think for a quote unquote therapeutic, even though we're not supposed to use that term, for a therapeutic model, I think a museum dose to a moderate dose, so anywhere from 1 to 3.5 grams is an appropriate amount of mushrooms for this type of work. Anybody else have any opinions on that? No? Okay, I'll keep going. So the last and most important step is
I see.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Was there a comment?
No, I was just agreeing with you that in my experience, for starting, it's a really good dose. It's okay to just start the journey of processing all the information is going to come with the trip.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So last but not least, the integration session, which again, my opinion is it's probably the most important step in the whole process, because that's where you take all of those new patterns, those new insights, and you try to integrate that into your life going forward. And then again, it's the facilitator's job to help you with that. We are not therapists, but we can help you come up with to reflect those back to you and help you develop a plan going forward. And I will say it's my intention as a facilitator. I want to help my clients, grow and learn. So I'm going to have a referral network of people who either IFS therapists. I know several IFS therapists that I can send people to, other types of healers that can help people continue in their journey. So I think that's the best type of offering that I can do, is to help them understand their insights, come up with a plan, and then continue working on that going forward. So again, the medicine is the catalyst. You do your own work, and we help you navigate the waters. So the last slide I have here is just resources. Some of the things that if you want to do more research on your own, I highly, highly recommend the Johns Hopkins Psilocybin Research website. It's actually a psychedelic research website, but I just called it psilocybin. It is a wealth of information about studies, about there's videos, there's a timeline of studies. It's really an amazing resource. So again, I can send a copy of this presentation in PDF format, and it will have links to this, but Johns Hopkins is a great resource. Part of the reason I'm here talking today is because I read the book by, like a lot of people did, I read the book by Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind. For those of you who are averse to reading a paper book, there is a Netflix series. They've turned a lot of that content from the book into a Netflix series. It's very digestible. They have 4 different chapters, one on LSD, one on psilocybin, one on mescaline, and I'm forgetting one. Anyway, there's 4 chapters, and and MDMA. I'm sorry, MDMA. So if you are interested in more information, I highly recommend that book or Netflix. Go and checking out How to Change Your Mind. There's another book by, it's kind of the Bible of how to be safe and do safe journeys, by James Fadiman. It's the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. I highly recommend it. In fact, I recommend any client that I'm going to potentially work with read the first 2 chapters of that, of what to expect in a journey and how we will be working together. So I actually tell potential clients to read those first 2 chapters in that book. And then there's an online resource, free online resource called Trippingly Guide. You can just go to Trippingly online and find that. And then you can always look up scientific articles under PubMed. Arrowwood is a great site looking for drug interactions, drug side effects, what to expect on certain doses. Arrowwood's a great resource as well as far as medicine is concerned. And then, of course, why we're all here today, Synaptic Institute. Shout out to them. They're wonderful, wonderful people, deep, deep repository of information, and just wonderful people in general. So kudos to them. Thank you for this opportunity. And I don't have anything else. I'm happy to take any questions. Oh, and then my email, if anybody has any follow-up questions, my email is here, and my website is 7gen Concepts as well. So I'm gonna, oh, somebody said, I have an experience with heroic dose. I'm sorry. I have experience with heroic dose. It was life-changing. Definitely wouldn't recommend it to just anyone. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. that's kind of what I call throwing jumping in the deep end of the pool, right? I mean, that's that can be some pretty profound work, but it can also be can be challenging for sure. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other. Hello, everyone. So, anyone have any other questions or comments? None? Nothing.
I have a question, or I don't know. Yeah, I'm just curious for those of you who have had experience, you know, prior to these kind of formats that are being developed, you know, with facilitation more officially, professionally. I'm just curious if anybody could speak to like their experience of the difference. I think that that would be a really interesting thing to me as somebody who has worked a lot with psychedelics on my own, a little bit with facilitation, but not like legally, you know. I guess I'm just curious because I'd have to say that I'm personally kind of turned off by, you know, the legal facilitation process and centers and all these things. But I'm definitely still open-minded and curious to hear kind of like what people's experience has been of like using this model compared. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that, Camilla. So thank you for your question. Thank you. That's a great, I think that's a very legitimate question. I think I'll answer it there. I'll answer it a couple different ways. So years ago, I went to Nepal for the first time, and I am the type of person that will just go to Nepal and do it myself, DIY, right? I'm just adventurous, and I will just jump in, and that's part of the adventure for me. And that can be scary, and that can be rewarding. And I got back and I gave a presentation at the Mazamas about it, and people were like, "I would love to go, but I would just never do what you did. I have to go with a guide." So I think the way to answer that is there's always people who, for whatever reason, and I don't judge, for whatever reason, they don't feel comfortable doing it on their own. And they want the guy, they want, you know, they'll get more out of it. They'll get more benefit out of it because their defenses will be down and they'll be able to go deeper because they know that they, you know, I hope that answers your question, but I think there's always going to be a set.
It doesn't fully answer my question in the sense that I get what you're saying, but for the person who's like me,
Yeah,
who isn't scared,
sure.
but still wants to be kind of convinced that there would be benefits that I could experience by doing it your way, this way, versus doing it my way. I guess I'm just curious about that.
I could hop in
Thank
here
you.
and you know, say that, you know, I've been doing this type of work for a while now, with ketamine, because ketamine has been legal, you know, as kind of a medical treatment. And I've had many people come to my office needing help who are experienced psychonauts. Not a lot, you know, but some people are like, yes, I've done, you know, a dozen LSD things, you know, or I've done, you know, some drugs at a party, and I've done it like in my living room by myself with the John Hopkins playlist, and like they've only gotten so far with that, and it just I mean, in many ways it's like anyone who needs a psychotherapist. You know, you could talk to your dog, or you could talk to a friend, and those are great things to do. But there are some limitations too, and sometimes you need that professional who has a little bit more skill in helping you navigate those sort of challenging, you know, bends around the river, those rapids, you know, that need to be gone through. And so, yeah, it's not everyone needs that. And not everyone's path is going to be with, you know, sort of a clinical professional either. You know, I'm of the opinion that, you know, this shouldn't be the only point of access for people to experience psychedelics. And, you know, I'm completely for a decriminalized model. I'm also for, spiritual practice model. There are people starting, psychedelic churches, that are much less regulated. There's some risks in that too, because people get in weird dynamics with power, and spiritual communities can happen. But I also think it's important that people be able to do that. And so the whole Measure 109 model, which is very experimental, right? It's like we're the first state to do anything like this. They really attempted to kind of split the difference and have this sort of hybrid model where they're not really calling it therapy, although they kind of sold it to us as therapy, kind of pointing to all the clinical research for its, mental health benefits and stuff. But yeah, it's sort of an all the above type of answer that I would give to your question. Is like, no, not everyone needs a guide, but there's a time and a place for it, and many people do need that. Many people want that, and it's also not for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Do you see it becoming covered by insurance? Do you see that coming down the pipes?
There are people working on it. There are working groups of professionals trying to do that. Honestly, I'm not in favor of it because I think our whole health insurance industry is corrupt to its core. And anyway, I could go on a long tirade about capitalism and healthcare. I'll refrain from doing that right now. But there are people who are trying to do that to increase access so that people who need it. But that also requires, diagnosis and a lot of gatekeeping from professionals and covering costs and whatnot. So I don't know if the incentive is quite there for the industry to do it that way, but there are people working on it.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Olivia had her hand up, and then Heliana.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, I'll just jump in really quick because I just want to add a few other things to this discussion of like, why have a facilitator or a sitter or a psychedelic doctor? And I think that there's something to be said for a therapeutic relationship. It's an alliance that you form with somebody who, like, that's the only role that they play in your life, is to be there for you as you learn, grow, heal, have epiphanies and insights into your own well-being. And it's different than what, a friend can do for you, a lover, a partner. And, on the client's behalf, on my patient's behalf, it's like, they just get to know that, like, that is our relationship. They don't need to show up for me in any way. They don't need to give me anything. And that creates a really unique environment for personal exploration and growth, be it individually or in a group. And the other point I wanted to make is that I think there's just a level of healing and personal insight that has to be witnessed in order to be integrated, and really being seen by somebody who's specifically trained and pursued deep education and how to show up for you in those moments can be really remarkable. And that's it.
Oh, your microphone is off.
Thank you. Sorry. Maybe my network is slow. I'm from Argentina, so internet is not the best. I couldn't agree more with what Olivia did said just now about the group therapy and having like group by 2 or 3 persons, like sitters. The energy that involves the process is really needed. And we do have to remember where the medicine and the spirit of the psilocybin come from, and that's the earth. And the earth is like contagious and circular, and need us to be like in communion with another persons, and to remember that we can hold each other's and we can just be there for another person. And the individual path is really necessary, but we have to share it as to be able to grow as community. And I think that's something that when you have this kind of medicine, we need to remember from where they come from, like ancestral and also Occidental and capitalism, and put it into therapies and on this new way of speaking about the medicines, but the medicines, they have like history. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's true. There's a history, and I was trying to get that point across. I think you did it more eloquently than I did. There's a history for sure. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I'm happy to stay here as long as we have a discussion, but I also want to just do a check. Yeah. So I will say, I'll add one more thing. We talked a lot about psilocybin tonight, but I've been paying, close attention to a lot of the other developments, and I fully expect, nobody knows the future, but I fully expect that a lot of these modalities are going to be, it's going to be changing. Things are going to be happening very rapidly and organically in the next few years. I personally expect the organ model to change. I think it'll evolve perhaps rapidly in the next two to 5 years. We're a test case. We're a test case nationally and internationally. All eyes are on Oregon. This is just in its infant stage, and these are the first. There's only like maybe six service centers open right now. We're just starting to get some data, and I expect things to change. And I think that MDMA may be coming online. For anybody who's familiar with MAPS, Rick Doblin has been talking about his vision of having 2,000 to 4,000 MDMA psychedelic clinics nationwide in the next 10 years. So that's just a vision. We don't know what's going to happen, but I expect between like ayahuasca and MDMA and psilocybin, things are going to change pretty rapidly. But I think it's pretty exciting that we're sitting on the deck as and watching all this change. So I'm just excited to be a part of it. So.
Thank you. I'm sure I'm going to write to ask some questions about how is everything going in the north, because here in the south we are much more behind everything, and everything is like slowly and difficult. But I'm going to for sure write you just to talk about the things.
Please do. And you said Argentina?
Yeah, I'm from Patagonia, south, but actually now I am living in Buenos Aires because in Buenos Aires is where we are trying to work the most of like institutes, and we are running 2 investigations, only 2 in the whole country, micro and micro, but they are not legal because we are like law prohibited, so it's difficult.
Yeah. Best of luck with that.
Thank you. We are doing a huge work.
Yeah. Anyone else for the good of the order? Any other comments or questions? Going once? Going twice? All right, everyone. If you have any questions, I'll get with Synaptic, and hopefully I can get everybody's email and I can send a copy of the presentation, and then it'll have my contact information, and we can all just stay in touch if we have more comments or questions, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Synaptic.
Of course. Thank you, Carrie. That
Have
was
a good
wonderful.
day.
Thank you. Bye now.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.